I know some of you have been on some trips. Some of you are about to leave for trips. Some of us are on trips. Some people are on trips. Our family got to have a really neat little trip to St. Louis last week, and thank you guys so much for letting us be gone. I thank the elders for letting us be gone for that Sunday, and I thank Chase for teaching you guys last week. The cool thing about Brian now records our lessons and posts them online so I can listen to them. So I actually got to hear Chase's lesson too later this week, and really, really good. I enjoyed it a lot. And by the way, I really appreciate Brian and who's right now accompanied. Thank you so much, guys, for you guys for what you do with our sound and our visual and stuff. Josh has been helping Brian a lot lately. If anybody else, if you would like to volunteer to kind of be trained by Brian and do some of the stuff, that way we can start rotating that more, because this morning I walked in and I didn't think Brian was here, and I thought, oh, this is going to be interesting, because we've gotten so dependent on Brian to make everything work. We appreciate that a lot. Let's pray. We'll get going. Dear God, I thank you so much for today, and I pray that through as we look at your word and as we read this story and as we dwell on it and we let it sink in, that I pray that you speak to us and you reveal yourself to us. God, help us to see you for who you are. Help us to see ourselves for who we are. And God, let us surrender our lives to you. That's such a difficult thing for us to do, and I just pray that you will help us to let go and surrender our lives to you so that we might truly live as you created us to live. In Jesus' name, amen. A couple weeks ago, we've been on this little series I've been calling Beginnings because we've been looking at just the first few chapters of Genesis. And 2 weeks ago, we looked at Genesis chapter 3, which was that really strange, bizarre story of Adam and Eve in the garden, and of eating of the fruit that God told them not to eat, and sin being introduced into the world. And really that story, what that story attempts to do is help us make sense of why the world is the way the world is, why we are the way we are. We live in a broken world. We are definitely broken people. We live in a beautiful world, but it is broken. We are beautiful people, and yet we are broken. And that story really helps us understand that a little bit. And one of the things that it helps us understand is that sin is not primarily mistakes, okay? We are not mistakers. We are sinners. And there's a very big difference. Eve didn't take a bite and go, oh my goodness, I picked the fruit from the wrong tree. I thought it was that tree. Oh God, what did I do? There wasn't any of that. Oops, that was a mistake. Oops, I slipped. No, she knew what she was doing. Adam knew what he was doing. They knew they were eating the fruit that God told them, do not eat. They were rebelling. They weren't mistaking. They were rebelling. And at the core of that was an appeal to their pride. Remember, that's how the serpent really got to. Yeah, there was, hey, it looks good, it tastes good. That wasn't really the main thing. The main thing was, you can be like God. You can be your own God. And that is the great temptation. And that is the great sin, is that desire for us to take God off the throne of our lives and to put ourselves there. I know what's best for me. I know what I want. I want to call my own shots. I want to do what I want to do. I want to serve who I want to serve. I want to be my own God. God, you take another place. I'm going to get on the throne of my life, and I'm going to rule as God. See, sin is idolatry. It is worshiping something, ourselves usually, that is not God. And that idolatry is driven by pride. And so some might say that pride is the worst sin. And I might go a step further than that and say pride is at the heart of all sin. Because pride is what drives us to place ourselves on the throne and take God off of it. So we're going to get to actually see an example of this rebellious pride in action, because right after the story of Genesis 3, we move right into Genesis 4, where Adam and Eve's first two kids are born, and they grow up, and we know those two kids as Cain and Abel. Just to set the stage, Adam and Eve have just now been thrown out of the garden because of their sin. Now they are beautiful but broken people in a beautiful but broken world, and they have kids. Now, I'm just going to spoil this from the outset. Probably this is not going to surprise any of you, but perhaps Cain kills Abel, okay? Just telling you, Cain kills his brother Abel. If you didn't know that, I spoiled the story for you, but I really didn't, because the important part is not the killing that goes on, but what it is that leads up to it. What is that causes that to happen? So here we are in Genesis chapter 4. Now Adam had sexual relations with his wife Eve, and she became pregnant. When she gave birth to Cain, she said, "With the Lord's help, I have produced a man." Cain means produced or something like that. Later, she gave birth to his brother and named him Abel. When they grew up, Abel became a shepherd while Cain cultivated the ground. So Cain and Abel are born. They grow up to be adult men. Cain is a crop farmer. Abel is a shepherd. When it was time for the harvest, Cain presented some of his crops as a gift to the Lord. Abel also brought a gift, the best portions of the firstborn lambs from his flock. The Lord accepted Abel and his gift, but he did not accept Cain and his gift. So both Cain and Abel feel the desire to present an offering to God. Abel's offering is pleasing to God. Cain's offering is not accepted by God. Ever wonder why? What was that? Some people have said that, well, it's because God wanted an animal sacrifice, a blood sacrifice, like they had later on in the Old Testament. But there's no really hint of that here at all. The only clues that we get have to do with the quality of the offering. See, Abel gave the best portions, literally the fat portions of the firstborn of his lambs. Really, the fat portions were considered the best, the most desirable. We don't tend to think of as fat as being the most desirable, but they did. Okay, fat was the best, the most desirable, and it was from the firstborn. Now, being the firstborn of the flock is key, okay, because the firstborn, for one thing, was considered the best, was considered the priority. That was kind of a big thing at the time in ancient times. But not only that, if you gave up the firstborn, you had no guarantee you were getting something else. I mean, you give your firstborn lamb, that's all you've got right now. You just have to trust that God is going to give you more and going to replace that lamb. Here I am. I've been worked hard. I got this firstborn lamb, and to give it away, that was a big deal. That was a big act of trust. And Abel gave his firstborn, the best part of his firstborn lambs, to God. In other words, he gave the absolute best that he had to give. And he trusted God to take care of him in the meantime. Cain, he gave some of his fruit, some of the crops that he had raised. The first fruits, the best portion, the best part of what he had, apparently not. He just gave some of the stuff. Apparently kept the best part, kept the first fruits for himself because he didn't know if he's going to keep on having, got to make sure and secure your estate here. Kept the best parts, but he gave part of it to God as an offering. So here, ever so subtly, this is so subtle, okay? Ever so subtly, we see rebellious pride at work in the life of Cain. We learn something about pride here. And that is, pride gives God a part. Pride, if it gives God anything at all, gives God a a small portion, a part, a slice of your life, a part of your energy, a part of your money, a part of your time. Pride says, I can spare this much. I'll give that to God. But the rest is still mine. Pride remains in control. When I have rebellious pride, I may give God something. I may give God a part of my stuff, of my time, of my energy. I may give God some, but I'm still in control. I decide what God gets, and I decide how the rest of it goes because I am still my own God. I call the shots. Yes, I want to acknowledge God. I want to pacify God. I want to feel good about myself, and so I'll give God a slice. I'll give God a part, but I still must maintain control of the rest. I still must be God. I'm still in charge. Here's the scariest thing about Cain. This is the most disturbing thing about Cain to me. Cain was a good church person. Okay? In modern terms, Cain was a good church person. Cain went to church. Cain maybe taught a class. Cain maybe helped with the kitchen. Cain maybe he donated part of his time to God. He was a decent religious person. And that's scary. While he was decent and religious, he had taken God off the throne of his life and put himself in God's place. He was a prideful rebel and almost certainly didn't realize it. But you and I can realize it. We can choose, if we want, to recognize prideful rebellion in our hearts. And one way to recognize prideful rebellion in your heart is to know this. Pride gives God a part. The other day, actually a little ways back, I was in a conversation, nobody from this church or anything, I was in a conversation with a person, and they said, and I didn't respond to this, it wasn't the time and place to respond to this, but they said, I go to church on Sundays, and I try to be a good person, and I think that's what really matters. Cain could have said that. He likely would have. Okay, back to the story. How did God show his acceptance of Cain and Abel, or of Abel and his not acceptance of Cain? We really don't know. Perhaps Abel's flocks flourished and Cain's crops didn't. Perhaps God communicated that in some other way. But eventually, it became obvious that Abel was being blessed more than Cain. And this is the way Cain responded to that. This made Cain very angry, and he looked dejected. Pride gives God a part. And secondly, pride is jealous of others' blessings. One way to know if rebellious pride is controlling you is to see how you respond when someone else gets what you want. When others look better than you, earn more than you, get more recognition than you, live in, drive in more than you. When there's something that you feel fairly good at that's kind of your thing, and somebody else comes along and they do it better than you or just different than you and they get praised for it, how do you feel when that happens? See, the presence of jealousy is a warning light. It's like one of those warning lights in your car. The presence of, when I feel jealousy coming up, that is a warning light saying that I have placed myself on the throne where God belongs. Now you say, well, what's the connection between jealousy and me placing myself on the throne? When I get off the throne of my life and I put God on the throne of my life and I worship Him and I don't try to be God, I allow Him to be God, I find myself in Him. And I discover that my value is not based on what I can do. That my value is definitely not based on how I compare with somebody else. But that God has made me valuable because He created me, because He loves me, because He has rescued me, because He has made me His own. And I cannot become more valuable than I am at this moment. You cannot, through anything that you might do, become more valuable than you are at this moment. When God is your God, when you worship Him alone and not yourself, you find your identity in Him, and therefore, you don't get jealous. Any ability I have, in 2 seconds, I can have it no more. I am one breath away from losing every ability I have. It is momentary. It's a vapor. My value, your value, comes from Him. So, if jealousy is in my heart, what that lets me know is that I am leading a prideful rebellion against God. Now that may sound like overstating it. I'm a little jealous, but prideful rebellion against God. No, that's really essentially what it is. That's what makes jealousy so dark. When you sense yourself getting jealousy, don't you realize the darkness in that, the ugliness of that, because it is a rebellion against God. It is the definition of being on the dark side. So, pride is jealous of others' blessings. Now, because God hasn't given up on Cain, okay? God loves Cain. God values Cain. He cares about Cain. And so God performs a bit of an intervention for Cain. And we don't know how He spoke to Cain, whether He did it through another person, whether He did it in a dream, we just don't know. But somehow, God spoke to Cain. And this is what God said. Cain, why are you so angry? Why do you look so dejected? You will be accepted if you do what is right. But if you refuse to do what is right, then watch out. Sin is crouching at the door, eager to control you, but you must subdue it and be its master. Cain, look, you can fix this. You can change course. Yes, no, I did not accept your offering. Yes, I have not been blessing you because you have put yourself on the throne instead of me on the throne. But look, you can change that. Abel's, your little brother has shown you how. Give me your best. Let me be your God. I am the one who loves you. I'm the one who created you. Let me be your God. Quit trying to take the throne for yourself. This is something you can do. I know it's hard. It's hard to take yourself off the throne of your life, but it is something that you can do, and you will be blessed if you do it. And if you don't, you're going to lose your freedom. Sin is right there. Like a lion, ready to pounce, ready to take you down. If you don't change course, it will. It will control you and it will take you down. God was teaching Cain just an incredibly important truth to him and to us as well. This is what God was teaching Cain. You can either use your power to surrender to God's will, or you will lose your power to resist sin's will. You can either use your power, the power that God has given you to choose, you can use that power to submit to God's will, or you will lose your power to resist sin. Might say it this way. If you do not make God your God, you will find yourself doing all kinds of things you don't want to do. You know this is true. I don't know if this rings with you yet, but you've seen this. You know this is true. If you do not make God your God, you will find yourself doing all kinds of things you don't want to do. This is the ironic secret about being your own God. you lose your freedom. The reason we decide to be our own God is because we want to be free. I want to make my own choices. I want to do things my way. I want to be my own God. And what happens is you lose your freedom, because the secret about sin is this: sin controls you. Your sinful nature wants to control you, and it will control you to the point where you will be doing all kinds of things you hate. Things that you do not want to do, things that you did not project yourself as doing, things that you couldn't have imagined yourself doing, and you find yourself doing them. Whenever you make God your true God, He puts all kinds of opportunities and responsibilities before you, and He says, choose. Choose wisely. Whenever you make yourself your God, your sinful nature takes over and controls you. It leads you to say hurtful things to people. It leads you to brag. It leads you to lie. You find yourself gossiping, making jokes at other people's expense. You may find yourself hoarding, overspending, going into debt. You find yourself worried constantly. You find yourself trapped in lust, burning with a desire that leads you into all kinds of behaviors that you're ashamed of. You find yourself consumed by what other people think of you. You find yourself in battles against people who threaten your position. And this is just the beginning. And you don't have all of these things at the same time. But everywhere you turn, something is controlling you. And you find yourself doing things you never wanted to do. Cain certainly did. Verse 8. One day Cain suggested to his brother, let's go out into the fields. And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. We understand Cain being jealous. We've all been jealous. I've certainly felt jealousy. I may have been jealous of some of you at some point. You have felt jealousy. We understand that. But this? How can you do this? How do you kill your own brother? We learn this about pride. Pride tries to destroy threats. You say, well, how was Abel a threat to Cain? Abel was very much a threat to Cain. Because Cain, since he didn't find his identity in God, since he didn't get his sense of value from God, he had to get it somewhere else. Maybe through his success, maybe through his job, maybe through his position. He had to get something external to him to tell him he was valuable. And when his little brother, emphasis, is more successful than him, is obviously more blessed than him, has more than him, that is a threat to Cain's sense of self, a threat to his very identity, a threat to his self-confidence. And when we have those kind of threats, when people, sometimes by their very existence, sometimes by intentionally competing with us, when people threaten our sense of self-worth, we try to destroy. Who undermines your self-confidence? Who makes you feel stupid? Who makes you feel shallow? Who makes you feel untalented, unsuccessful, unspiritual? Whose very existence makes you feel a little bit less of a person? Deep inside, you know that the problem is not them. I mean, they may be arrogant, they may do things that make things worse, they may have but deep inside, you know that the problem is inside of you. You see, when you try to be your own God, you feel very insecure. This is just the way things work. When I try to be my own God, I'm going to call my own shots. I'm going to do things my way. I may give God a part. I'll give God a slice, but I control the rest. I'm still God. When I do that, I am instantly insecure. Why is that? Because I don't belong on the throne. I don't belong on the throne of my life. That throne doesn't fit me. It wasn't made for me. And when I'm sitting on it, I am uneasy. I am insecure. And that insecurity will lead me in conflict with other people. It will put me in competition with people, especially other insecure people. And I will find myself in some way trying to take them down. In some way trying to destroy them. It's why you gossip. It's why you become competitive in things that you have no business being competitive in. It's why you're secretly happy when they fail. Afterward, the Lord asked Cain, "Where is your brother? Where is Abel?" As if he didn't know. "I don't know," Cain responded. "Am I my brother's guardian?" But the Lord said, "What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." One more thing we'll notice that pride does. Pride hides sin and shifts responsibility. Cain tried to literally buried what he had done. And when questioned about it, he claimed ignorance. I don't know anything about that. That's not my job to know anything about that. So how could Cain be so blatantly dishonest? I mean, especially with God. I mean, how do you lie to God? Well, here's how you do it. First, you lie to yourself, and you convince yourself. As soon as I place myself on the throne in my life, as soon as I make myself my own God, I must justify my reason for being there. I have to justify it. I have to justify it in my own mind. And as I do things, even things that I hate, I've got to justify them. I've got to figure out the reason and make it okay. I have to justify it. And once I justify it to myself, then I can justify it to somebody else. We will justify ourselves so we can justify ourselves to others, even if in reality it's a blatant lie. We can thoroughly convince ourselves that a lie is the truth. Show me someone who can justify their actions, even though their actions are clearly wrong, and you can see someone who is their own God, who is ruled by rebellious pride, who is in rebellion against God. Let's close this way. I'm going to assume that there are maybe many of us here who are very much like Cain was at the beginning of this story. You're a very decent, religious person. You're a decent human being. You do church. You have some things in your life that are God. You give some of your money to God. You give some of your time to God. You give some of your effort. And you give God a part of your life. You give him a slice. But you're still God. You still call the shots in your life. You're still in control. You are on the throne of your life where you are insecure. And as long as you are there, you will never be okay. You will never be at peace. You will never find your real identity. You will never realize how valuable that you are. You will never be a complete person of yourself because you have to prove yourself, because you've got to get your worth from something you do, from something you are, from something outside of you. And you may have never done a sin with big consequences. You may have, But you may not have ever done a sin with huge consequences like murder or adultery or something else that we think of as having huge consequences. You've never robbed a bank. You've never done something that puts you in jail for the rest of your life. You're here, so I assume you're not in jail. So you haven't done maybe a lot of those kind of things. But pride, that you have in abundance. And because of that pride, you are living in quiet rebellion against God. Against the God who created you, who rescued you, who loves you, and who has incredible plans for your life, and who calls you to worship Him and Him only as King of your life. And all the sins that control your life, that lead you to do what you don't want to do, they can all be traced back to that rebellious pride. And this morning, kind of like He did for Cain, this morning is God's quiet intervention for you. And He whispers, it's not too late. It's not too late. Look. You can get out of that throne where you don't belong. You can put me there where you belong, and you can find yourself again. You can change this. You don't have to be eaten up with jealousy. You don't have to be eaten up with bitterness. You don't have to be treating people in ways that you hate, that you despise. You don't have to secretly hate yourself and hate what you're doing. You don't have to be controlled by sin. It doesn't have to be that way. Lay down your pride. Submit to my will. I'm the one who created you. I'm the one who loves you. You find yourself in me. Just want to have just some space here for you and God to talk. And if you realize that you have been one who has been giving God a part, a slice, and yet you have been in control, to give you a chance that if you desire to say, God, I'm sorry. And I don't want that anymore. You are my God. You are the only one who belongs on the throne of my life. And I submit my life to you. We're going to pray. And I'll stop and I'll just give some time in silence for you to pray on your own. Father,